Well, everyone, thank you so much for coming and being a part of our discussion. We are so thankful that you're here with us. Little side note, if you see us kind of slapping in the air, it's because we are joined by a bug. A fly got into the studio, and so that's um, that's always a lot of fun. But so we're here again and continuing our conversation. And let's go ahead and let's jump off of one of our previous sessions where we talked about we kind of put the parallel out there, and we kind of referenced the nature of addiction like a beast, and how destructive that the beast, that the kind of given that creature mentality, and how the impact that it causes us to have on ourselves. And so I guess today kind of kind of steering our conversation to talk about value. You know, how in just that idea that when in the grip of that beast, in the grip of addiction, um, so prior to the recovery process, maybe even in the beginning of the recovery process, that the from what I've gathered and seen is that the the person's value that they hold over themselves, the value that they have within themselves, is um small, is, I guess, if I can put it that way. It's the idea that um I you individuals who get so close, and they don't feel like they have an escape, so they value their physical lives so little, um that they are willing to make some of the worst decisions. Does that make sense? I guess I'm kind of being a little bit vague on purpose to allow openness in this discussion, but
Yeah.
um, it's just an interesting thought. I think a lot of people, we it's very easy for us as someone from you know someone who's not been addicted to substances. It's very easy for people outside of the addiction community to see how someone can have their life all for one substance, or a group of substances, right? And that you are going to live for those substances. That's very easy for someone like me to be like, yeah, I click on that. But where I think it's a little bit of a further step for me to see that the value that someone perceives himself with, that an individual perceives himself with, that value, um, that perceived value decreases as you live for that substance. And I guess that's one thing, I guess, that I don't know, it's kind of hard to wrap my mind around sometimes. And so um, it's kind of an interesting thought, I guess. Something like that. So it's I yeah I it's an interesting thing, I guess, because I guess for me, like, one of the things I'd like to convey as a pastor is that there is a value, and I guess that's why I'm kind of putting the two separate. I'm saying value, and then I'm saying perceived value, and the reason I'm putting it that way, it has to do with your value in the eyes of God, your value in the eyes of those around you. That is your inherent value, and that is a standard that doesn't change. And then there is the perceived value, um, where and then why I'm putting the value versus perceived value, because the perceived value is where we lie to ourselves, right? I'm not worth this. I'm junk. I'm where the lies and the depression and the lies of the addiction start speaking to you, and it tells you that, oh, you're worth nothing, instead of realizing that there's other people who have a value over you that is separate from what you're perceiving. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And so, um, what is there? And this is a good question. If you can kind of give me your perspective on this too. Is there a a communication on what you're worth when you enter into the recovery process, regardless of wherever it's from? Is there that sense of what's your worth? What's your value? And do they bring that subject out? Do they talk about that?
Yeah, I think that's probably one of the first things that when you get into recovery, you have to really kind of start working on.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's a process.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
You know, so I think that before we start to use,
Mm-hmm.
we already have a misconception of our own value.
Mm.
You know, I don't think that. I think when I started to use, uh, there was partly, curiosity, but some of it was to fit in.
Mm-hmm.
Some of it was because this is what other people I knew were doing,
So
and I wanted them to see me as
okay.
cool or
So pursuing
valuable.
that value in their eyes.
Right,
Yeah. Okay.
right, and and then I think as you get further into addiction, um, I guess towards the end of my addiction, I'll say I only valued one thing,
Mm-hmm.
Well, no, two. I valued drugs and money,
Right.
because one correlated with the other.
They fed each other.
Yeah, and so, um, so my own value, because I let some people shit on me.
Mm-hmm.
Excuse my language. I let some people, do some things that were terrible,
Right.
and then I did the same thing, and so um, value wasn't really a thought as far as
Mm-hmm.
me as a person. Like
Right.
I didn't value, obviously I didn't value my life even,
Yeah.
from the, I guess not the last one, but the one before when we were talking about it, I didn't place value in anything,
Right.
but yeah, once you get into recovery, I think that, they do kind of try and beat that into you.
Mm-hmm.
You're worth it. You're worth it to stay clean. You're worth
Yeah.
it to try something new. You're worth it to have a different life.
Right.
And it's not like they say you have value, but
Right.
it's more of we've been there,
Yeah.
so we understand. And I think that when I first got into the program, my misconception was that my value was based off of what other people think,
Right.
and at first that was probably helpful,
Right.
you
It's
know
those first steps, those baby
right,
steps. You're getting in there. Yeah.
right, I think that, at first it was helpful in the way that, it was like, oh well, they like me, or at least they tolerate me,
Right.
which means that I'm not as bad as I thought,
Right.
um, but as you get further into recovery and the more that happens, that's positive, even when it's not positive,
Mm-hmm.
it's a strengthener. It builds your character, all that.
Yeah.
And you kind of learn who you are, and as you're learning who you are, you start to value that person
Yeah.
more, and I still have work to do. I still have, I still have them thoughts about, you're not a good person, what I
Right.
mean?
Oh yeah.
And it's a hard cycle to break in that way, but
Mm-hmm.
I do value myself as a person from within,
Right.
and it no longer is based on what everybody else thinks,
Mm-hmm.
but that still falls in sometimes, sometimes it disrupts me,
Mm-hmm.
if I feel like somebody thinks something about me, or they, that's negative, or they treated me in a way where I felt like it was negative. Sometimes that old thinking process will come back,
Yeah.
but I wanted to say something about, you said, like, so like God's perception of you never changes.
Mm-hmm.
You're always
You're always valuable in his eyes.
Always, always, and and I think that that is true for the people who love you also, who
Mm-hmm.
are um, they might be frustrated with you, they might be angry with you, they might, you
Right.
know, but the reason why they're like that is because they value
Yeah.
and that's hard to see when you're using.
It is hard, in for the community, even for those who are entering recovery, it's this idea that when you have something that you have value for, that you love, you cherish, you've put stock in something, right? Emotional stock, value, the whole idea of the value conversation there. But the idea that it becomes, when you have a value, when you have something like that, it becomes a hill that you're willing to die on.
Right.
Is that idea? It's a something you're willing to go fight for. We look at the conflicts in our nation's history. Um, we look at the protesting, and we see these people who are willing to go to prison for things. They're willing to be arrested for their values, for their beliefs and their convictions, and it's because at some deep level, it's something they're willing to fight for, and that's a little bit harsh. But even then, like when it comes to relationships, if we value a relationship, we value an individual, we go after, and there's a pursuit and a maybe an emotional or a mental or even sometimes physical. Just you have to have that fighting attitude to go after to because you believe in something, um, which is really fascinating. Because I mean, as a community, how does a community come around the addicts? Do we sit there and pat them on the back and say, "Hey, keep going in this mess," or do we fight for that person? Do we see they have a value, because we see their value? We're going to do whatever we can um, to step into that and to go with that. It's like significant others. When if you have a value in the relationship, you take steps to ensure that that relationship continues. Whether it's um, in the terms of counseling, or you know um, cutting off things that would harm that relationship. You do steps to value that relationship and allow it to flourish. Why? Because we're fighting for it, and it's kind of the same idea too, where we back to the addict, we see that, and we for the community. Why is it so important? It's because there's a life there that is valuable in the eyes of God. It is an important piece, and it is cherished, and so that's why we need to make sure that we go after that, because we see that. And um
I think you're talking about two different kind of concepts of value, though. You're
okay.
talking, I mean, because you're talking about what I value you as,
Mm-hmm.
and then we're also talking about what as the person, the addict or whatever, values themselves as,
Mm-hmm.
and I think that you know, if you value someone,
Mm-hmm.
sometimes you have to let go of
Right.
let go of them because you can't watch the destruction,
Mm-hmm.
and so that's a hard that's I'm sure that's a war that happens within that
Yeah.
is not fun, and it's probably and it's not
Well,
fair.
and that's even then, that's a biblical concept too, a Bible
Right.
concept, because there is a point where, yes, like Christ loves us so much that he pursues us and he comes after us. But there's also a point where he respects our personal decisions. And if we want to walk away from him and deny him and trash that, he allows our personal stuff to come in. He's like, I'm not gonna sit there and force someone to be here who doesn't want to be here. That's how
Right.
great his love is. And
Right.
it's kind of the same idea too, where like there is limits where, hey, this is no longer a benefit. And like that does not detract from that sense of value,
Mm-mm.
but it does say, you know what, I do have to be protective, and I can't keep, it's kind of like knowing where, and again, this might be something for another conversation, is just knowing how far you can go. And I think we have talked about that in the past. How far can you go to help an addict? um how far before it's just too harmful for them or for you, and you just have to let them go. There is that moment. I'm reminded in the book of Corinthians, there was a believer in the church who was just living in a way that denied Christ, denied everything the Bible taught, and was not turning his life around. He knew the truth, but was not turning his life around, and the church was doing nothing about it. Or they this and the writer makes a statement. He goes, "You just need to hand him over to Satan." And so that maybe by handing him over to darkness, that he might get his life turned around. And that's hard because I don't want you to go deeper into that mess. But if sending you deeper into that mess turns a light on, then okay, right? You made this comment about how when you got to the bottom of the barrel, you got to the bottom of the line where there was nothing left for you to do. You're in the cell, and what happens? What's next after this? You've gone as far as you could, and that's one of those things where it is hard because we do want to fight for them. We love them so much, but then there is moments where we just have to let them go and get to the deepest, darkest recesses, the bottom of the line where they can't go any deeper, and say that maybe by going that far, maybe maybe their eyes will turn on, maybe God will get their attention, maybe something will happen. Right. And I guess I'm kind of referring it that way because and talking about the two, like you had mentioned, talking about two different senses of value, because there's the value that people see in you, and that is one type of value, and then there's the values that the, for lack of a better word, the addict or the subject, there's the values that they see and the values that they have, and how do they have their own value system. Is kind of it's basically the way I'm kind of talking about it is kind of vague in the sense that it's just two sides of the same coin. It is still a value coin, but it's just what side's being used.
Right. Just because you value someone doesn't mean that you can control the situation or the person. Yeah. It probably is never going to happen.
Right.
But and sometimes you need to value yourself enough to where you just resist whatever is happening and just maintain your own path, whatever that may be. And that's, I'm talking about on the community side of thing and the people that surround. Sometimes you need to value yourself. You need to remain in that state of mind where you are valuable enough where you don't fall into these traps. Because an addict will drag you into a trap as soon as they can and as quickly as they can. They'll manipulate you. They'll lie to you. They'll do whatever they can because in their world there is no value. So even you saying like you were the person who was loved me and wanted me to do better, you can get dragged into it, and it can cause some disturbances in your own thought processes and the way you feel about yourself and think about yourself, because you take that one step into the dark and it's a little easier to take it again, and then next thing you know you're kind of in that and you're like, what in the hell is that?
How did I get this place?
Right. And that's kind of how an addict works too, if you really think about it.
There is a pastor in another state, and I know him personally, and great guy. Let me preface it. Great guy, great ministry, and just did a lot of amazing things. In the process of him doing ministry, there was a season where he had been mentoring and ministering to a user. How far, if they were in recovery or what, I don't know, but there was a relationship such where it had developed to a point where the user handed over his drugs to the pastor, and I've shared this before, and he hands over these drugs to this pastor, and he gets in there, and this has been going on for a while. Well, then these drugs were in the car, and the pastor had a really bad season. I don't want to say bad day. I'm going to say multiple days. And he was just stressed and overwhelmed, and he's like, well, I wonder what this will be like. And he started using, and over the years became an addict to it. And it ended up wrecking his ministry at the church he was at the time. He had to spend time in prison for it. And so it really just tanked his life in that regards. And
Addiction is destructive.
it is a very destructive thing, and that's hard because there's this passage in the book of Galatians, and it says that when you have to confront someone, when you catch somebody who is in the midst of doing wrong, and I'm paraphrasing, when you catch someone in the midst of doing wrong, you need to let them mature, so those who have the muscle mass, not physical, more maybe mental, or they've gone through it, they have the strength to handle the issues. Let those who are mature, let those who are godly, because it's addressing the church, let them handle the correction. And when you do it in a spirit of gentleness and humility. And then it says this: keep watch over yourselves so that you don't fall into the same error. If you think you're something, don't deceive yourselves. You're nothing. It's like, because we can there, because the opposite side of value is like, there is that point where we put too much stock in who we are, and like, oh, I'm above failure, right? I'm above relapse. I'm above, right? And that whole text is like, no, you be careful. Don't think stuff more than you're not.
Anything of politicians.
Yeah, they do. They walk in. Funny story. I was at the Capitol last year, and I walked in. I was there for. I was praying. I was doing opening invocation for one of the sessions at the house, and had my suit on. Right, all these kids and these adults were all touring, visiting field trips, and me and my son were there, and I got my suit and tie on, and they had no idea who I was from Adam. I was there. They see me walking with a suit and with a messenger bag, and they're like, "Oh, everyone parted the seas. Everyone split." I never had to say excuse me or please or pardon. I never had to say anything. They would part, and then they would even open doors as I would walk up to the door. Here, let me get that for you. And I'm like, I'm a nobody. I'm just here for fun. Told my son, I was like, I'm never coming to the Capitol without a suit ever again. But sorry about that.
No, that's all right. It makes sense. I think that in speaking to another addict, that you know, you have to have a little bit of faith when it comes to recovery, and
Mm-hmm.
understand that that pain that you feel when you first come in, it does go away, and you start to feel some value for yourself. And usually it happens over a course of time, where you make little steps, to do something better. Whether even that means you're making meetings, just on a regular basis. That's something you probably wouldn't have done in the past,
Mm-hmm.
and feeling that sense of responsibility, you know, um, it builds. It just takes time, and um, you can't just don't be discouraged, because you're gonna have setbacks. I've had setbacks where, I went from feeling pretty darn good about what I was doing to all of a sudden it's like, I
You
can't,
messed up,
yeah,
hit about again. Yeah.
I don't know how, and it always something that you do. It may be something that happens in life
Mm-hmm.
that just kind of brings you back down, and um, but the thing is that I never really had thought about this much before, but you know, most people go through life and have problems, and
Mm-hmm.
they get through it without doing drugs. Well, that was my go-to, obviously, when things went wrong,
Yeah.
but learning how to live your life, going through problems without actually having to do drugs, is a booster,
Mm-hmm.
and like feeling feelings was always kind of a weird thing for me, because it was like,
Mm-hmm.
I've always been able to just kind of blur them out by getting high, or bury them or whatever else.
Yeah.
So when I started having these feelings that sometimes came in spurts and were overwhelming,
Yeah.
I had to find a way to kind of get through that, and it's talked about
Mm-hmm.
in the program, and in the big book, and the NA book, about how to manage that,
Mm-hmm.
and um, you know, and the funny part is that once you manage it once,
Mm-hmm.
it boosts that confidence, and you start to remember the value you really do have, that yes, I can do this, you
Yeah.
know, yes, I can make it through this. I might not want to, but I can do it, you
Mm-hmm.
know. And um, the more that happens, uh, the more you'll value yourself, you know. And in the end, I think that should be a goal for everyone, you
Yeah.
know, is to have genuine value for themselves,
Yeah.
because we all matter,
Yeah.
you know,
Well,
whether you know it or not.
yeah.
You matter.
Yes.
I mean, not particularly you, but you know, even if you're, you know, you think that you have this minute job and your life is boring and everything else, you matter because you make a difference somewhere.
Yeah.
Whether you know it or not, you make a difference. And so you have value just like everyone else. I don't care if you're rich or poor,
Yeah.
you know, I don't care, you know, if you're man or woman, it just doesn't matter. You have value. And um, the way that an addict coming into recovery values themselves is they start to learn who they are, and they start to figure out that they can do things without having to fall back into the garbage that they were in,
Well,
you know.
here's a funny parallel. You know, one like, so my youngest turns 5 this next month, and
Mm.
so it's been really fun. You know, because I have
The one that looks just like you.
the one that looks just like
Yeah.
me. I have my oldest is kind of a healthy mix between the two of us. My daughter
Mm.
is a healthy mix, but right now the youngest is he's like a carbon copy image of me when I was that age.
Right.
And but what's hilarious about him is the last couple years, he has been coming into his own. Right, mom and daddy had to help him do this, do you know, help you get dressed, help you put your toys away, help you do this, because you know he's a toddler, right?
Right.
Well, in the last couple of years, he's getting to that point where I can put my own shirt on. I can get dressed. I can go to the bathroom by myself. I can put my toys away. I can get the milk out of the fridge. He hasn't dropped it yet,
And he's
but
resistant to
he's,
you guys helping
oh yeah,
him.
no, he's like,
Once he figures it out.
once he knows he can do it,
Right.
all bets are off the table.
Right.
It's, oh, I got this. No, 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 Daddy, I got this. I got this. I got it. I got it. Don't help, Dad. I got this. It's like, okay. And there's a part where like it's hard. He's like, part of me wants to be that resource for him, but I have to sit there like, all right. So I'm watching like, oh, look at you, good job. And of course, even though that's hard, but like seeing that new strength, he's at the outside looking in. Oh man, that is amazing. You know, look at this. That my boy's growing up. You know, here. But at the same time, for him, like his confidence has boosted, and oh, I can do this now. And so he does that with a greater confidence. Well, then now that he knows how to do, now he knows how to get dressed. So now he's realizing, oh, I can pick out my own clothes for the day. Now I can pour my own cereal. Now I can, and so these like you say, that building of value is once you learn how to navigate the 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 recovery process, and you know the value and the strength that you have, and like, hey, I was able to handle this issue without using today. That is huge. That's invigorating. Look what I did.
Right.
And they're like, okay, I can do it. That I whenever I face the same issue again, I know I can do it. And so you have that confidence level, and then it's like, well, what else could I do? And then it's like, well, I'm gonna try it this time. You know, and you might have setbacks in that process, but you still know that as strength gets more strength, your confidence is boosting, and then you take stock. You're convinced you have value in your skills, and you value yourself more as in like I say, and I love that because that is that growing process of, you know, it's you're not 2 anymore. You're now 15, and you're like, I accomplished all these feats, and you know it's a process, but it's a hard process, but it's necessary and good and healthy for the addict.
Right. See, and I think when we're young, you know, kids, teenagers, even young adults, we have a tendency to base our value on what other people see or do or say, and that's why we hide ourselves a lot. You know, is because you only show your best side,
Yeah. These people see me
so that
this
they
way.
value
So
you because that's where you base your value. Well, one thing that recovery has taught me is that my value is not based on that,
mhm.
and because of that, it's kind of it's opened up the whole fact that I don't have to be
Right.
put on my best face. I can just put on my own face,
Yeah.
and if you like me or you don't, it doesn't really matter because I have my own basis of value,
Yeah.
and that's invigorating,
Yeah.
and it's it's something that I think that everybody should really, I don't know, I don't have any idea where people are at in their
Mhm.
lives, and how they feel or whatever else. I can only express my process and how I've done things,
Yeah.
and where I am at in my own life. I mean, I still have my days where I just hate life,
Yeah.
and it's like, I just want to, just, and it's usually over dumb stuff,
Yeah.
but for the most part, I value who I am,
Yeah.
and when I value who I am, I have a tendency to make the I don't know if they're
You
right decisions, but I make decisions that
stronger
are,
decisions might
yeah,
be.
I make decisions that are not going to harm
Yeah.
if I can help it,
Well, and here's the funny thing, like the whole idea about like wearing a mask and hiding, because as a pastor and leader in the church, I see this where there's this almost this weird kind of subtext where when we come to church, we have to have it all together. We and this is I'm saying this as somebody who's um was a youth pastor in two different states and two different churches in Tennessee, and a full-time youth pastor in Texas before coming in and leading the church up here in Minnesota. And this even growing up in a church in Washington State. So when I talk about like the church, I'm not talking about like, oh yeah, this is our church and this is what we see. I'm bringing multi-states, multi-communities, different cultures, and like so when I say that the idea of wearing masks in the church and presenting a certain image, it's it is massive. Like
You
even
know
in
how
the church,
strange that is to me because that would be like me coming into recovery pretending like I've already been in recovery. You know what I
yes,
mean? Like the whole point of me going to that is because I need to be there and
yeah.
I need to. So for someone to come into a church and put on a mask
The,
seems a little odd to me
I
because
I
you're there
had
for a reason, and whatever
it's
reason that is.
it's everything from the language that's used, the
Yeah,
clothing that's worn,
yeah.
and I've seen it, and for me, I'm like, it's like how is this helping us? Why can't we just come in and be real, and worship the Lord together and say, hey, when the Bible says weep with those who weep and celebrate with those who need to celebrate, okay, then that tells me that there's got to be an openness and a transparency to how things have been going for us.
Right.
And if we're hiding how things are going for us, then we can't be a decent resource.
Well, and you can't really. I don't know that you can really learn because if you're spending too much time masking,
Mm-hmm.
you're not really you're not really gaining what is being given to you
Yeah.
because you're like, oh no, I'm okay,
Right.
no, you're really not. Yeah,
Well, and
I mean, maybe most of them are. I don't.
right.
I'm just
We
saying
have no idea, but
I'm
that's
talking about recovery, I
yeah.
guess.
Well, and that's the beautiful connection between the two, between the what is seen within the church circles and how we present a certain image and how we hold our value system as like people in the church versus even within the recovery nature of that same thing. I'm going to present this image because I there is a sense of values that hey I value what others think of me, and because that value of what others think is higher than what I need, what that idea of like
And
I'm my going back to the perceived value again. That perceived value is stronger than the value that should be, and so we go into that perceived value, and it's like okay, no one's going to see my junk today.
right,
No one's going to see the hurt. No one's going to see that even taking this and talking about the church, no one's going to see how that me and my significant other had a big fight in the car on the way here. Everyone's going to walk in with a smile, and we're all going to hold hands as the siblings are white knuckling it, right? That's the same thing. It's like in the recovery stuff.
And that's kind of normal just in general.
Yeah.
But I think that is also one of the reasons why an addict has a disconnect with the church.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not blaming anyone in this situation, just so you know, but
this is conversation,
right? A lot of times, well, for me, my disconnect was that I could see. So some of the people who I know went to church on a regular basis. Yeah. I saw their lives for real, and it was different than here. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it was kind of like, it's fake. It's and it caused me as a person to shy away from some of that, because it I don't want to say in addiction I wasn't fake, because I was, but I was also very real, in the way that I talked, or the way I acted, people knew that I was the piece of garbage I was, and I didn't try to hide it, So it always seemed weird for me to see some masks go on so you can go in here. But then again, if I had to go someplace and I was high, I would mask that I was high. I would wear clothes that would make me presentable. So I mean, all that stuff makes sense, But what does that have to do with our value? I think that it diminishes some of our value if we mask some of the real stuff of who we are and the problems that we really go through, because we all have them.
Yeah.
There's not a single person in this world who can say, I've never had a problem.
Yeah.
That would just be ridiculous. Or I've never sinned. Well, that's ridiculous. It's just,
it's like you have, it's like saying, like, if I'm going to use a gold and silver as an example, but let's say you have like 5 bars of gold that you can sit there and use to bless, to use to in the community or whatever. But the whole masking is, what masking is said. So you have 5 bars of gold, and like, this is the value. This is how I can bless people. This is how I can be a resource to others. But what masking does is it says, I'm going to take your 5, and I'm going to hide 4, so that everyone else can only see that you have 1.
Right.
And so it's the whole idea of like what you have to offer to help somebody else, or even to allow someone to help you. It can be taken away and saying, oh, I have less, or it might even say, like, you know what, hey, here's the 5 additional bars that I colored gold, instead of saying, like, look, I do need more help, but I'm gonna make it look like I don't. And what's happening is, because of that misconstruing of someone's value or that perception, what that does is it robs 2 people. It robs the one who needs the help from getting it, because they've lied about where they're at, and so it robs them from receiving the help, and then it robs somebody else who has the means to help and wants to help, but doesn't see the need.
Right.
And so it kind of robs that whole idea. If every addict was dressing sharp and clean and presenting a perceived false value, presenting something else, and they had, like, their life is all together, and their clothes are sharp, their car is sharp, the whole presentation is like, oh yeah, they're fine, they're a good person. They're not getting help that they need.
It's like that whole saying, a closed mouth can't be fed,
Yeah.
So your faults, whether you know it or not, can be strengths.
Yes.
And they may not feel like a strength to you, but so me as someone who's in recovery, someone expresses their own faults, and they talk about it, and they're like, I'm working on it like this, or I'm trying to do this, and I relate to that fault.
Right.
Whether you know it or not, that has become a strength, because it's sparked that own thoughts in my mind, and maybe helped me to seek a different way as well, or you know what I mean. And it might have been something I couldn't have talked about before, because I thought I was the only one with this fault, which is a ridiculous way to see things. But you know, and so you can't just value the good parts, you
Mm-hmm.
know, like I did all this good stuff, so that makes me valuable. No,
Right.
you know what else makes you value is that you're flawed,
The flawed.
you know,
They're huge.
because you have flaws that in it, because you have a flaw, you have to work on those flaws,
Mm-hmm.
and it may be one at a time. You might have 100 of them, but you can
Right.
only take on one at a time,
Yeah.
you know.
Exactly.
But each step you take through correcting that flaw becomes a confidence and value builder.
Yeah.
And also, you have to value your flaws because I can promise you that there's someone else who has them flaws too.
Yeah.
And, you know, and the best way to build in life, I think, is to connect,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and we don't always connect through just, you know, hey, I got a good job, you got a good job. What, you know,
Yeah.
a lot of times I think the deeper connections happen from having similar flaws
Yeah.
because it's something you need to work through
Yeah.
and um, you know, and I'm telling you, you you well for me,
Mm.
I hate saying you, I don't know why,
Yeah. Not
but
well. You're speaking outward,
right,
not to. Yeah.
right. But for me, my my biggest boosts or jumps in the way I thought and felt about myself
Mm-hmm.
were when I was able to overcome some of those flaws and those things that I thought I had to hide.
Yeah.
You know, when I was able to realize that not only should I not hide them,
Right.
but I should be completely honest about them and work through them was, you know, because then nobody can take that from you.
Right.
You know, they can't be like, oh, he hid that whole time, you know, and now he thinks he's all better. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? They can't take that from you because you know what? No, I was transparent about this. I did the right things. I was completely open and I worked through it.
Yeah.
And now I can be proud of what I've done, which boosts my value. And then I can, but then also on the other side, I have information for the next person.
Right.
Like, hey, this is how I did it. You
Right.
might have to go about it a little bit. You might have to navigate a little different or whatever else, you know. But that's the beauty of recovery is that each person who goes through it, the further they get down the road, the more they learn
Mm-hmm.
about how to navigate life
Yeah.
without drugs.
Yeah.
And then they pass that along so that the next guy can be like, oh, he had to go through this too. He had or she had, you know, this same problem and this is how they did it. Maybe I can try it.
Yeah.
You know, it opens up a door that wouldn't always be there. And that's one of the things that I feel sorry for those who aren't recovering addicts
Mm-hmm.
because there's a whole process that you go through that I don't know that in a normal life,
Mm-hmm.
you know, that's you know
It's a harder lesson for us to
right,
get.
you know, because you're so used to kind of hiding some of that junk, you know, no matter what it is, you know, that you know I think that I grew up in this generation where it was like if you have a problem, you have to deal with it,
Mm-hmm.
and you should do it on your. Especially being a man, you know,
Right.
you know, toughen up, you
Right.
know, quit crying, you
Right.
know,
Yeah.
get on with it, you know,
Yep.
and
Man up.
right, you know, and it's you know, but I can still do that, toughen up,
Yeah.
not cry, man up, and still be transparent and
Right.
honest about the problem, you
Yeah.
know, or whatever the situation is. So, you know, it's, I think I lost track of where I was headed with that,
That's all right.
but you know, I just, you know, because I was talking about, you know, I feel bad that people don't get to experience recovery
Yeah.
because it's amazing, you know. And I think the one thing that I might be able to equate something like that to for those who are Christian
Mm-hmm.
is when they're baby Christians and they
Yeah.
like kind of are just absorbing all this information and they're excited and on fire about it and
Yeah.
can't wait to get baptized and they can't wait to do this and they can't, you
Right.
know, and that's what I think recovery does for you know, because you become engulfed in it, you know, and
Yeah.
then you just kind of you have that just I don't know.
It's a very exciting. You're becoming something new. You're a fresh lease on life.
Right,
And that excitement, it does, and it spurs you on, and so you want to make these leaps because
right,
you're seeing the beauty of what you're getting into. You're seeing the beauty of what you've been given,
right.
and
It's like
it
I,
causes you to get into it more.
you're like, look, I paid a bill, you
Yeah,
know.
right.
Hey, you know, and most people would be like, okay, yeah,
Yeah, right.
we do this all our
All the
life, you know.
time.
But you know,
It's a
this is
big deal.
it is a big deal, and it's a growth, you know. And I'm not saying we're all, you know, handicapped in responsibility or everything else,
Uh-huh.
because some people actually are functional addicts.
Yeah.
But what I'm saying is that you know, it's those things that you can look and be like, ah, you know, I did it, you know, and
Yeah.
I didn't have help, and I didn't, you know, I didn't, you know, I was able to do this on my own,
Yeah.
and I can own it, you know, and when
Right.
you can own something, you know, it puts that it, it it depth gives that value depth.
Yes.
You know, it's not kind of a superficial value; it's more of a depth, and the
It.
more you value yourself from within, uh, the more that kind of comes out,
Mhm.
you know, and you treat people better. You
Right.
know, you have different perspectives. Like you know, there was a time in my life when I looked at the world as most people are bad and there are some good.
Mhm.
You know, well, I don't see it that way anymore. That's changed in my mind. You know, I think most people are good
Right.
and do some bad.
Mhm.
You know, like we all make mistakes or whatever. But I think that um, for me, I try to feel like people are coming from a good point.
Mhm.
You know, and that they just you know have issues and
Mhm.
sometimes they make mistakes, you know, but I think that they're good, you know, that there's always good in people somewhere,
Mhm.
you know. I think me and um, Serena had the discussion one time where, you know, I was like, well, do you really think they're good? And I was like, well, yeah, I think there's probably, you know, they made
Choices were
mistakes.
made. Yeah.
Yeah, choices were made. I've made bad choices. Does that make me bad? No.
Yeah.
It doesn't. I'm, you know, I feel like I'm a good person who was caught in addiction and was making bad decisions, and I don't know that I even thought about those decisions. You know, they just were reactions to the
Yeah.
way life was, and this is just the way it was. You know, that's
Yeah.
what I thought. You know, and I didn't value myself, so I put myself in positions that were terrible. You know, and um, you know, so I think it's important to kind of get back to the whole value thing. I think it's important for people to value themselves, you know, and not just the addict, but those people who surround the addict, you know, and the whole point in valuing yourself is that you have something to give,
Mhm.
you know, and I think that's an important component uh, to surround an addict
Yeah.
is that you value yourself first,
Yeah.
you know, and I think I've said that a lot that you know that we want the community to be healthy and we want them to, you know, well, part of that health is value,
Mhm.
you know, because if you don't value yourself, you're going to allow me to walk all over you, and
Right.
as an addict, I'm going to walk all over you.
Right.
You
Exactly.
know,
Exactly.
I'm
Yeah.
going to try and do it even if you do value yourself. You know what I mean? So it's just it's a protection,
Mhm.
and it's not always easy. You know, we
Right.
all have different walks of, we've all come from different places, you
You're right.
know, and so um, people have a hard time valuing themselves because this happened at some point in their life, and you might be 20 years down the road and they're
Right.
still, you know, they haven't dealt with that. Well,
That's still
that's kind of that open up and
it's still that deep part of their own identity
yeah,
right there.
you know, that's why you know, like I said, I think I just got honest with myself and became transparent and um, you know, and so there's those secrets are not secrets,
Yeah.
you know, and you know, I don't have to carry a lot of secrets.
Yeah.
You know, I might have to carry yours, but I'm not. I don't have to carry my own.
Yeah,
You know.
right. And I think that's an important part too, is recognizing that
Right.
personal responsibility. And we're gonna be wrapping up soon, because there's stuff going on. But I just kind of bringing it in for a landing right there is why that personal responsibility and that personal value system is so important. Because again, like we have to value each other. We have to value one another. We have to value ourselves. Um, Again, because realizing that I've got something that I can bring, they've got something they can bring, and to the table, to the conversation, um to helping one another, right? Whether it's in the church or in the recovery process, that the idea that there's a story there, there's a person there. One, hey, I have my story, I have my value, I have my gifts that I've been given, my story, my identity, right? And that carries with it value. It's every person. You got yours, they've got theirs, and those there's an inherent value right there. But then I need to make sure that we can see that, and we can see that value and say, okay, and that value, how it motivates us. And um the idea of not letting myself be walked over is because I value who I am, and I'm not going to allow that value to be trashed.
Right.
And that's why that personal that personal value, that the value, like looking in the mirror, I value this individual. You know, how simple is that applied? How do you take care of yourself? How do like my family, we're going through a whole dietary change right now, and that's my wife loves it. I'm getting used to it. But it is one of those things too where we value our health, and so we're taking steps, and because we value that, um, we value our emotional state, we value our physical, our mental state. Why do we take days off? Why do I have boundaries and limits on like when I'm approachable, when am I not approachable? It's because I value. I'm gonna put that in place, right? And that, again, that's that own value, but then recognizing that there's other people that have that same value, and how can I honor them, how can I respect them, how can I feed their value, how can I let them know that they are loved, and hopefully, in the terms of the addict, get their eyes open on what's happening around them, and seeing what's going on. And so
I just kind of something I was thinking about while you were saying and all that is that, there's also that whole idea that someone else may not value you,
mm-hmm.
and I think that generally comes from a place of judgment, like they feel like they can, and
That false
so
perception again.
right. So yeah, and you can kind of cut through that,
mm-hmm.
because most of the time, I'll say for myself, most of the time that I've judged somebody else is because that judgment presented in myself.
Yeah.
And so I was just like, and
yeah.
So maybe valuing yourself, you might know that somebody who doesn't necessarily value or judges you, that they probably, just kind of keeping in your mind that they probably have had a little bit of that going on in their own lives.
Yeah.
Well,
so here's a great scriptural Bible reference to that idea of value, and that how that judgment is based upon something that starts here.
Mm-hmm.
It says, "Why are you so worried about the speck of dust in your brother's eye, all the while you have a plank in your own?"
Right.
First, deal with the plank in your own eye.
Right.
Then you can see clearly to help your brother with the speck.
Right.
And that's the whole idea of like, you know what? I'm just over there judging you for the speck in your eye. When my issue, it's not a speck, it's a plank. But I'm judging you for your issue, realizing I've got issues in myself that I need to deal with.
Right.
And so, because I value myself, before I mess with you, I'm gonna mess with myself first.
Yeah.
Then, hey, the recovery, right? Why is the recovery community so great? Is because these individuals who value themselves, got themselves clean, they see clearly. They're coming to those who have specks in their eyes, and they say, "Hey, we've been there. We know. You're valuable. Let me help you." Right? They've taken care of their issue, and now they're coming and helping someone else. Yeah. And that's, again, that sense of value is such a big component in there.
Right. and as far as like the community surrounding the addict, I think that one of the biggest things um, for you valuing yourself is that you're allowed to stand up for yourself.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you allow yourself to do that. You allow yourself to have boundaries. You allow yourself um, um, to do the right thing for your life instead of, you
Right.
know, what an addict would try to drag you, an active addict, I'll say,
Yeah.
would try to drag you into, um, and by doing that, by having that boundaries and those, the whole idea that you can stand up for yourself, um, it it helps to close
Yeah.
um, that little circle. The circle gets smaller and smaller for an
Right.
addict when people around them are like, no,
Yeah.
I'm not going to do that, or you know,
And again,
or they set boundaries like this is it. You can't do this to me
yeah.
ever again. It's just it makes more sense.
Yeah.
Um, kind of like the whole idea that we keep saying is we want to shine the light on this. Well,
Yeah.
the way you shine the light on it is you have to be healthy and you have to be able to stand up for yourself. And part of standing up for yourself is having value of who you are.
Yes.
So if that's what you need to work on, then work on
Yeah.
that. It's okay.
It's okay, and
It's okay. We all have been down in the pits where we don't value ourselves.
right.
So it's important,
Yeah.
and I think it's productive even just as a person,
Yeah.
to work on your own value.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. No, that is so good. I'm gonna wrap it up right here, if that's all right. And that's one of those things where you know what you have value, and if you need to work on it, we all do. It's a process, and but it's important. So I hope that you've been enriched from these videos and that you enjoyed this, and we'll see you next time. So thank you so much.